Hey, hello everybody. Welcome. Nice to see you all here. Afternoon, Friday. It's been a pleasure. It's great 2 days. It's been very fun. We're very happy to be back on Serverless. We've been in Brooklyn half a year ago, pretty much. And it's pretty cool to be here in London again talking about Serverless. So much things have changed in just a few months. It's great to see all of you. You should all feel pretty awesome about taking part of this early on in this community. And my name is Yochay Kiriaty, with me Chris, and we're going to talk a little bit about DevOps for serverless and how do we see it and from where we're coming from, and maybe a little bit of try to entertain you a little bit with some demos and examples that we care for. So as I said, I'm wait, it's okay, it works. My name is Yochay Kiriaty. I'm a program manager on the Azure team. Sorry, specifically working on Azure App Services. Must be exciting here.
I'm Chris Anderson. I'm one of the PMs for Azure Functions.
Right, and again, we got, as you saw, scroll back for a second. We're going to talk a little bit about DevOps because yet another DevOps talk on serverless, right? Because there is a great kind of maybe a misconception that if you have DevOps, people think, hey, you don't need to have any ops. Sorry, if you have serverless, you don't need to have any ops. So what if I told you that serverless is not really, doesn't mean that there's no DevOps? And there are a few DevOps sessions here, and anybody seen Kiriaty yesterday? Right, so unlike Kiriaty, we don't have any unicorns in our session. We have the real thing. If there were any unicorns, right, they will be big and gray, and we would call them rhinos. Okay. So with that in mind, there was a little bit of change coming in, right? And this change, basically, is what our team is being transformed in the last couple of years. Within our team, App Service, we've been working on fully managed platform offering for the last 4 to 5 years. When we came out with what was back then called website and today is App Service, we gave you the ability to deploy your code. It wasn't function, but just basically any app pretty much. And it would just work. No SDK, no magic behind the scene that you need to do anything special. Fully managed platform, completely. You did need to carry a little bit of scale, but nothing else other than that. And through that time, we actually went through and learned a lot about how to run stuff, because we run behind the scene everything for the guys. So the fact that it's fully managed allows everybody basically to focus more on doing development, doing the thing that is valuable for them, and allow you just more to do less IT, but you still need to be able to do DevOps for your product, for your application. And what that has taught us at the end of the day, that this is our team, or part of the team. You can see a bunch of engineers, few PMs. We got a few interns. This was in the summer, so interns in the summer. It's cool. Chris is here. Chris, raise your hand. Chris Gillum. One of our developers. Another Chris. Where's another Chris? Here's another Chris, sorry. Raise your hand. Another Chris. Is Matthew in the room? Here's Matthew, another one of our developers today. And then bunch of management overhead. That's how we feel today. And that's the team. And the thing about this team is that everyone on this team, including the management overhead, are doing on-call service and are get called in the middle of the night if something goes wrong. And I was looking for on-call and some funny stuff on on-call on the internet, and guess what? There's a lot of memes for on-calls. So this is one of them, and this is what happened when you're on-call on the weekend, and here's another one, and another one. Look at the innocent eyes, right? Look at this. Amazing, right. So this is what happened when you're on-call, and we get to be on-call to make sure that everything works for everybody. But as part of that, when you're building application, anything, including serverless, yes, you don't need to take care of the fully managed stuff, you don't need to take care of your servers, you still need to take care of your application. And with that, I think, we're going to talk a little bit about what does it mean for us. When you do that, basically, to enable a modern DevOps cycle, you need to basically have everybody on board. So engineers and everybody basically write code, test it, deploy it to production, monitor and debug, and get called when things go wrong, usually Friday, 2 or 3 a.m. in the morning. And when that happens, everybody goes in and engineer code, test, deploy, and you see where it's going. And basically, this is the same thing we've been pitching with our product. This is a marketing slide. Apologies, it's the last slide before the demos. Basically, just a cycle magically disappearing. Is we back? Yes, we're back. Okay, so you develop, you push it in the code repository, you build it, you deploy it into stage, you test it, you deploy it, you move forward into production, you get some telemetry back and monitoring, you find some issues and so on. All right, so with that in mind, and this is what we're trying to pitch, with functions, basically it's kind of the same thing. With Azure Functions, there's a little bit of triggers and bindings, and we'll show a little bit in a second. But basically, you can develop. You can either develop in the cloud. We have some local stuff we'll show you in a second. You execute it. There's output bindings, but basically, those four are kind of the same. And with that, I think we are ready for demos. All right. So with me is Chris, and we'll try now to entertain you for the next 15 minutes, give or take. And
hopefully I didn't break everything when I did that.
Kind of. You want to go with the portal?
Yep.
All right. So, hey, Chris, so I need to create some sort of HTTP endpoint really quick. What are my options? How can you help me?
Sure. Well, I mean, the first thing to do with serverless is, of course, there's some kind of web editor portal. So let's consider just creating a new function really quickly via our web portal, if my Wi-Fi will cooperate with me, which is always fun. And that kind of gets to some later advantages later in our demo.
Yeah.
There we go.
If no internet, it's going to be a really short demo.
So we can go ahead and create a new HTTP function. We can go ahead and just click on create, and because I don't care about the name there, and magically we go ahead and we should have a URL here in just a second. Maybe if I click here and then there. I would normally be able to just go ahead and click on that URL, and I would be able to go off and run my function. So you go off there, you see my URLs there, click on this, and boom, I've just clicked and run my function.
So just like that.
Just like that.
Really cool.
Cool.
All right. So this is nice, but some of my dev team doesn't really like or enjoy building stuff in a cloud editor like that. I mean, can you help me, get my usual tools and tool chain working on my laptop?
So you just want to run it locally?
I just want to run it locally. Yeah.
Okay, we can do the exact same thing. So I'll just go to this nice clean editor here. And we can go ahead and just create an entirely new function app experience basically by just going through here, and we're just going to do new func. We'll just go to that new library, and then we have this awesome library that you can go to right now. It's called, you can install it via npm at Azure Functions, no dash in between the name. And essentially what you get there is then you have the abbreviated func CLI at that point. Here I can go ahead and run func new. And this will actually go ahead and grab all of our templates that we currently have inside of the portal.
Something bad happened. Func new destroyed the projector.
There we go. Right. Func new projector. So we can go ahead and choose any kind of language that we have. You can see here all the languages that we currently support.
Oh wait, so we support all these languages?
Yeah. You should use JavaScript though.
Okay. Wait, what are all the templates?
We've got a lot of templates. This is the lightning talk, so we can go through these things if it was a thunder talk, but it's a lightning talk. And you can see we just got a lot of different things here for JavaScript. So we're just going to go ahead and go with HTTP trigger in this case, because HTTP is the hello world of serverless. We create that, and then I can do func run HTTP. And you see there, it spun up a little console window. That console window ends up being the host, the actual host that we run even out there in the cloud, locally on my machine. And then I can go ahead and hit it via localhost and HTTP. If everything is being kind to us. Or you know what? I bet you I forgot something. And it was funcinit, which this adds a few files in there for me to manage my secrets and stuff locally. So that's kind of how that works. But then it goes ahead and it will run. So you see it eventually responded back to me. And now that it has that file, it goes ahead and responds, and I can do my classical demo that any of you who have talked to me today has kind of seen, where I do name equals world, and it returns hello world. And I can go ahead and, from my local machine, open up VS Code, which is my favorite editor for JavaScript development. And I can, quickly just add some exclamation marks here, hit save, and refresh, and I have exclamation marks. So it's nice and a quick development cycle, nice and fast, no restarting of hosts between saves, things like that.
That's very cool. Just let me kind of drop my mic. So drop my mic, right? All right. So you're running this locally. Let's say you run locally, and you have a little bit more than hello world. You can actually pass some real object and stuff. And something might go wrong in my function, or I want to actually take a look and understand how thing better works in the function. Is there anything you can do on that front?
Sure, let's take a look at a more advanced sample that I've already kind of prepared all the magic of show business. And you can see here I've got just a function, and this one's going to be handling both get and post for a function. So I kind of combine them both into a single function. You can also choose to break them up into separate functions, and that's just fine as well. It's really whatever your choice is. And in this case, I'm just doing a very simple thing of calling off to this items library, which will go ahead and get me any items that I've got. And I've got this other ability to go ahead and kind of post to the items library. But you note that in my sample, I don't want the post library, the add a new item library. It turns out to take about 5 seconds to actually finish adding something to the library. It's just an arbitrarily made up thing. I'm actually doing set timeout 5 seconds behind the scenes. But I just wanted to simulate something that would take a long time to respond. Well, if I'm doing HTTP, and it's going to be something which is going to be user-facing, I really don't generally want it to take a long time. If there's a failure in the request because I jumped into the subway or something like that, or maybe I just am going to be holding on some kind of browser operation when I do that, it can't take 5 seconds. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm actually going to drop that into a queue under the covers using functions binding model. So here in this bit here, if I zoom in, you can see here that I'm going ahead and just kind of adding to our context output. I'm just pushing new items onto our queue. And we've got this ability to, on this context object, add new things onto a queue. And the queue is just defined via this fancy function.json file. I've just defined this queue. It's going to point to this item name, and it's going to be using a connection which has been named Azure Web Job Storage.
Yeah, that's cool. So you can basically add item to a queue without really knowing how queue works.
Yeah, exactly.
That's nice. Okay, cool. So let's say you have some sort of an issue with this func. What are you going to do with it?
Well, I mean, you're comfortable with printf, right? I can just go ahead and do func run and then do item. And
yeah, something like that. I mean, that's what usually people do, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you do console.log.
Actually, kill that other host. And you see there that it ran, and I could have gone through and looked at all my various logs that I have here. If I go off to my items log here, you can see that I got that process to request log. That's what you wanted to do, right?
Yeah. I guess so. If you get an object like a more complex audit, what we do? You're just gonna printf again?
You just keep on pasting, right?
Yeah, just keep pasting. This is so 90s, right? It's like feeling like Back to the Future.
I guess.
Yeah, I guess. Don't you have I guess I would imagine that we're in 2016. I would like to be able to have ability to attach a debugger.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could do that if you wanted to, because all you have to do to attach a debugger in Azure Functions localhost is just do --debug, and magically it'll go ahead and drop into VS Code an actual configuration file. If I go to the right VS Code file, and you can see here I now have attached Azure Functions as a debug profile. I just hit this, and then if I go back to my CLI and poke it because it was waiting for me, well, I should also probably attach a breakpoint. That'd probably help. But I can go ahead and attach that breakpoint and then go ahead and hit this again. I don't need to hit debug again the second time. And you see that I actually attached a debugger locally on my machine. And the cool thing here is I can actually see all of my different objects here. So it's not just like a simple kind of debugging experience. I'm able to actually go through there and see all the different objects that were passed to me along with that request.
So that's sweet. You have a function and you can debug it, run it locally and debug it locally, right?
Yeah.
All right, so this is cool. But this is an HTTP trigger, so it really doesn't make, it's not really surprising if you can run everything locally in debugging, right? Let's say that this thing needs to actually communicate to the queue that you have mentioned and use an Azure queue. Mm-hmm. Are you able to also debug that one?
Sure, yeah, so here's my actual queue function that I had written, and this is the one that's calling my add API, which is going to behind the scenes take 5 seconds, because once again, I set the timeout for 5 seconds, so I know it's going to consistently take that long. And what I want to do is I just want to have a breakpoint here so I can see what that item contains, because I'm not quite sure whether or not I got that object's format correct. So we can go ahead and set that breakpoint, and we'll go ahead and just make a call via postman, because that's why I add new items to my thing. And you see here I really need to finish this demo. So I'm going to go ahead and just send this one. And you see here that we hit the breakpoint of the actual HTTP request again, because I can hit the breakpoint anytime, as many times as I want to after I've attached to the Azure Functions process. But now I can go ahead and hit continue here, and you'll see that we're going to hit it again, because now we actually hit the breakpoint of that queue processing thing. In this case, we actually had that HTTP function go out there, receive its request, post things to Azure Queue Storage, And then we had our local host trigger off of Azure Queue Storage in all of under a second. And this is actually hitting the real data coming back from Azure Queue Storage. It's not some kind of emulator. It's the actual real service. It's the real experience you'd have when you deploy it up to the cloud. And so in this case, I can actually see what my item ends up being. You see here that I have some kind of operation context ID, so that way I can track it between the requests. That'll come up a bit later. And I have what the actual item was. And so in this case, it was to do finish demo.
All right. So just to make sure we're on the same page here, you create a new function. You can develop locally. You can debug locally. It can consume any services from Azure. And basically, you can run the whole dev part on your machine, right?
Yep.
All right. So I guess it's time now to deploy this. So I guess this is a Node app, and you can obviously be requires and whatever I can do. So I can package this, put it on a zip, and upload it somewhere.
Yeah, I guess you could if you like making zip files.
What's wrong with zip files?
It's fine. It's just kind of old.
So 90s, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So what else do you got for me?
Well, we could just use our existing tool chains, like deploy this via Git.
Oh wow. Okay. So how does that look like?
Well, in this case, I actually have the ability with function apps to create a Git endpoint on a function app that I can actually deploy straight to and not have to futz with any CI tools or anything like that in between. I can always use a CI tool, which is really good when you're going to production. But when I'm doing dev time work and I just want to work from my local machine to the cloud, it's really nice to be able to just push things straight at my function app and kind of work in that fast fashion. So in this case, I can actually see if I just go ahead and do Git status here. I got all these various changes that I've got. I've made a bunch of changes to my index.js and my function.json, and I actually added a new package recently. So I'm just going to go ahead and do, I can do it via command line, but I'm also going to just cheat here, and I can do it via this. So I'm going to add things through VS Code, just click, 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 and update item logic. Do this, and then I can hit publish from VS Code 2, but I am one to kind of go ahead and look at my status via command line just to double check everything. And then I can go ahead and do git push origin master. Yeah. And the reason I'm doing this command line is because what we'll actually do is while we're doing that, we'll have our what we call the CSM endpoint, which is managing that Git connection, communicate back to you about that deployment. So what's happening here is it's not only saving that to the Git that's running on that remote server, but it's also going to be running a deployment step for us. We can have custom deployment scripts involved here. We can do all kinds of sorts of things. And one thing you'll notice this script is going to do is this script will actually go ahead and install those node packages for me. So not only do I not have to zip up node packages, but I don't even have to potentially commit them into my local thing. I just have my package.json, and as soon as Azure Functions runtime sees a package.json, we'll go ahead and automatically install those node modules for you, so you don't have to futz around with doing that and packaging it and uploading it yourself. So in this case, we do have to wait for NPM itself to do its install, which can take longer than we'd always like to, especially during demos where I only have 5 minutes left. But you see here that the deployment was actually successful, and I didn't have to ever create a zip file in order to make that happen. And now, remotely on my actual function app itself, I can actually go off to, this was deployed to one of my things called Func Insights, which is going to inform the next demo we're about to do. And you can see here that this should have all of my new content that I had just uploaded. So here you can see that I've got my Git, all of my posts, and all of my modules are actually already there under the covers as well.
Cool. So this brings us to the last piece of this little fun demo. So we build locally, we develop locally, we tested locally, we committed to the cloud, so we publish it. And I guess now, you have all these functions running, and it's super cool, it's a production, everybody happy. It's Friday, by the way, so this call is the wake-up call is gonna get pretty close, right? So somewhere tonight, the customer is gonna call in and says, hey, I have a problem, I really have a problem, something is broken, and we recognize that this function is the issue. So how can we look into what's happening with my functions?
Yeah, for all of our functions, we have the ability to kind of go back and look at all of your past executions and kind of go look at essentially what are your printf statements from that function. So you can go back and look at all the past logs. You can look at various information that's going on there. One interesting thing about that is it can actually take a long time to go parse through all those past logs. So sometimes this can take a while. You're gonna have to go look at printf statements.
Right. So I'm gonna start here again. Printf again? Haven't we got beyond that a couple of minutes ago?
I thought you liked printf statements.
No, we don't like printf.
Okay, cool.
So what if I want to see more information, like telemetry for my functions, error rates, how long does it take to complete a function, traces, something more meaningful than just console printf.
So what you really want is like a monitoring service then?
Yeah,
like
kind of.
Application Insights maybe?
Maybe.
Okay, well, I mean, we've got this cool product called Application Insights that I can access. I've got this other portal here, and you see here that we're actually able to get, kind of live insights for what the server response time was, any particular requests that were coming through, if there was any failed requests, which in this case there was no failed requests or any page load time metrics, but we're able to see all that stuff. And they've got this really cool analytics dashboard where I can actually run queries and get graphs and, really dig into the data.
This is nice, but I need more because I have a serverless functions, I have a lot of functions. And a lot of functions belongs to one, basically kind of create kind of a workflow if you want to think about it. So I have one customer, he comes up, he says, hey, here's my customer ID, I have an issue, help me. What do we do there?
Well, I mean, I guess if you just wanted to dig into the data, it's more than just, a graph generator, which is really cool as a dashboard, but you can always dig down right into the actual events themselves. So everything that we're logging there is easily accessible via, new queries out here. So we can, if let's say the error just happened, I just want to look at, the top events that just happened, it's easy enough to go ahead and, grab items. You can also go and do searches on exactly the operation ID that maybe the customer gave you or any particular metadata that customer gave you about what went wrong. You can do a lookup and see what went wrong, and I can actually see any data that I'd sent to it. So for my function, we've got our query, we've got any we've got body contents in there, anything that we want to.
So basically, you have a correlation indeed that we can actually track execution across functions.
Yeah, and that's exactly what you actually saw in that queue function that I had there. That queue function was actually going through there and processing all these various things, and I had the operation ID, and I was saving the operation ID for both of those different pieces so it would work.
All right. Do we have any other demos?
They're gonna tell us to get off the stage. The last thing we're gonna do is just showing alerting, but we'll go ahead and run.
So we can do alerting, right? We can be proactive.
Yeah.
One more slide just to summarize, and we're off. Sorry. Okay. So basically, last slide. So when you build serverless application with Azure Functions, if you want to think about your DevOps, so DevOps is constantly changing. It's become more and more dev-centric. When you want to basically build a DevOps team to make it, and it's basically a culture change. Everybody has to be on call. Everyone has to be on call, including managers. Very important because they can enforce change, and everybody help with customers reported incident. Really? That was brutal.
It's lightning talks, man. You have to thank me for stopping him from crash tackling you off the stage.
Fair enough. All right. Thank you, guys.
Please thank our friends from Microsoft.